And I was thinking to myself, golly, I can't believe I came all the way out here and I'm with this man for 2 hours. I still don't get his thing. I don't know what he's trying to say. But why does the thing keep, you know, why does the book keep calling to me? It was the message that said, becoming your own banker.
Carlos Lara is joining us today, and he is the co-director of the Nelson Nash Institute. Carlos, tell us about how you first discovered the infinite banking concept, becoming your own banker. Tell us that story. How did you come across that?
I hate to start in this other way rather than answering that question, Lee. And it's I want to explain why I do this, okay? I think most people know this, but they may not know it. And it always helps me to be able to communicate better. And that is that 5 years ago, I had a major stroke. And it's what they call the bleed. And literally, in essence, what happened is that this whole side of my face basically blew up.
Mhm.
It completely just. And when I woke up, I couldn't understand anybody. It sounded like gibberish. And I was in the hospital for a long time, and they were trying to get my blood pressure down, and it wouldn't go down. And so I was in the hospital, and everybody seemed to be pretty worried that this is it, man. He's not going to come out of this thing. Well, I came out of it. And the interesting thing about how I came out of it is that I don't look like a person that's had a stroke. You know, if I tell somebody I've had a stroke, they say, "You don't look like you've had a stroke." This is how they talk to me. And quite honestly, it makes me mad because I say, "No, man, I'm sick. I had a stroke, serious stroke." I will say those things to them. But what really happened was that coming out of that stroke, I may not look like a person that's had a stroke. But as you well know, I've written, I don't know how many articles, tons of articles. I've been on podcasts. And so I had a way to articulate my words, and I was good at it. Well, I lost all that when I had the stroke. Gone. I'm talking about like gone, gone. And so I came out where I couldn't read, couldn't read anything, couldn't write anything, and I couldn't add or subtract. Well, that's my whole life, just gone. And you cry when you realize you got no other choice except just to get sad and cry. It reminds me about the one person that we interviewed just the other day. She couldn't stop crying. And her situation was that her dad had a stroke. And she also knew that I had a stroke. So this hit home with her. And believe it or not, it hit home with me. I was having a hard time not crying myself because I don't know, I've been in places where I did it out of the instructions where I was, going to get classes on stroke victims. And so I sat with stroke victims, and so many of them, they couldn't even talk. And they were all kind of bent up, a stroke victim usually is all bent up, he just looks like he's distorted. So as time went on, I began to get very, very grateful because I didn't look distorted, even though I could no longer communicate what I used to communicate before. So as I go into this podcast, it's a different Carlos Lara, really. It's not the same Carlos Lara many of you know. I can no longer do those things. Nevertheless, I continue to write. I do continue to write, and I've written several books, and it's painful to write this stuff. And if it wasn't for David, for some reason, David always gave me this feeling that I was okay. He said, "No, you're fine. You're coming across just right." And I always thought he's lying to me. He's trying to make me feel.
Yeah.
But it always helped me, always did. So I start off with this because this is a different Carlos Lara. If you used to listen to me 5 years ago, I did not sound like this. I was much more articulate than I am now. I try, and as I said, I've done presentations, and everybody tells me I did okay, and so I'm still going at it. Now, another thing that helped me, quite honestly, uh, is just knowing Nelson, just knowing him. I actually had my stroke about, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks after Nelson passed away. That's when the stroke hit me. I met Nelson when I was visiting with a business owner in his office, and I looked across the table where his credenza was, and there was Nelson's book sitting on the credenza. Now, the book I saw didn't look anything like the book we have today. It was different. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this was the book that I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first edition, right?
Yeah, the very first day. And this is Nelson right here on the cover right here. And of course it's got the words becoming your own banker. Those are the words that got to me. Because see, I knew banking. And the title captivated me. How can you become your own banker? And it wouldn't go away. And I am what is known as not anymore, of course, but at that time, I was a broker dealer. So if you don't know what a broker dealer is, you might could look it up. But a broker dealer is a broker sells stock to people. So he's a broker and he sells stock. A dealer is an individual that owns the stock himself. And then he sells it to other people. Now, to become a broker dealer, you can't believe the licensing process you have to go through to become that. And the reason you have to go through all that is because along with those two functions of a broker dealer, you're also licensed to deal directly with the Federal Reserve. So you're actually doing things with the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve doesn't have any money.
No.
But they deal with banks. The banks are the ones that hold the money, but the Federal Reserve kind of runs over them and controls them. And so the Federal Reserve now is going to deal with broker dealers because they may want to buy bonds or something like that. And broker dealers are licensed to buy bonds or sell bonds, that sort of thing. Well, that was my life. That's what I did. And I take this book. The guy says, "What book are you talking about?" I said, "The one sitting there across right there on your credential. He said, oh, I have no idea what that is. I haven't read it. And he said, if you want it, take it with you. And then you tell me what it's about because I haven't read it. So I went home with Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And, I couldn't get it. I didn't get it. I tried to read it, and it didn't make any sense to me at all. Now, later, Nelson says the reason you couldn't understand it is because of your training. It was your training. You had too much information in you, and so that's why you couldn't understand it. But I didn't. I couldn't understand it, and I looked on the back of the book, and I noticed that there's his address and his phone number. And so I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I think I'm about 3 hours away from where you guys are, and where Nelson was. And so I said, I'm going to call him. And I thought I would be calling some toll line or something, and some people would come on and give me all kinds of instructions. Well, no, it was Nelson that answered the phone. He answered the phone himself. I was surprised to hear his voice, and I introduced myself to him, and I told him what I was wanting to do. I said, I'm thinking about, like to meet you. I'd like to go to Birmingham and, sit down and talk to you. And I'm trying to read your book. I'm struggling. I told him I was struggling. And he said, fine, well, come on. I'll tell you where we'll go. He told us where we should meet. He said they serve good food there. So I said, okay. And so I took off, and here I go. And I got to this place. I can't remember it. Unfortunately, it's part of the aphasia that I have, that I can't remember things. So I may make up things, but you'll get the drift, what I'm saying. So I arrive at this place where we're going to have lunch, and it's the lunch hour, and the place is packed with people. They're all getting their tables situated with the stewardess there, and I'm looking around to see if I could see the picture that I had of Nelson Nash. Which one of these people in here is Nelson? I couldn't place him, and I'm looking around, and in fact, I actually walked up and asked some people if their name was in it, and they said, no, that's not me. I did see a man sitting there, and I thought the man was odd because he was wearing hush puppies. You know what hush puppies are?
Yes.
He was wearing hush puppies.
What's wrong with hush puppies, Carlos?
Nothing. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's not what I was expecting, because I showed up wearing a coat and tie like I normally do. I was just being myself, but I don't know. I don't wear hush puppies.
He was probably wearing a mock turtleneck also.
Anyway, the point is that I finally walked up to the man and asked him if he was Nelson Nash. He said he was, and he says, "Come on, we'll find us a seat." And so we sat down at a table, and he actually told me what to order. He said, "Order this. This is really good." So I followed his instructions, and we're sitting there, and he says, "Are you a Christian?" Just like that. I mean, that struck me so odd. Just out of the blue, just saying that. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I am. He said, well, good. Now we can talk. And we did talk. And so the conversation that we were having wasn't anything deep. It was mostly he was trying to explain to me who he was and what his background was and how long he'd been doing that. He kind of talked a little bit about the family he had. And then he gave me an opportunity to tell me what I did. and I noticed that he was intrigued with what I did. He was very intrigued with it. I think the part that he liked about it is that I had to deal with the Federal Reserve, and I don't know whether he had just never had met anybody that did that kind of work or not. I don't know, but I could tell he's very intrigued with that. And so that conversation, went over lunch, but that's about all we talked about. And so I said I would get back in touch with him, and I'd like to meet with him again. And he said that's fine, and just give me a call and let me know. And we said goodbye, and that was it. That's what happened the very first time. Really, not much except we learned about each other. That was the main thing that we learned.
6-hour drive for lunch. Good for you. So who paid for the lunch?
I paid for it.
Yeah.
I paid for it because I was, I was quizzing him. He was the star as far as I was concerned, and so the second time I met him, I remember I called him and I said, "Hey, I want to meet with you again because I'm having trouble with your book. I can't make it. I don't understand it. I can't figure out what you're talking about. Sometimes you're talking about this, and then you're talking about some other stuff over here. So I don't know. I just don't get it. And I just need a little bit more time with you. Okay, will you see me again?" He said, "Of course." And Nelson's always very polite, very polite. And so I come back to Birmingham. Now, this is the second time, and we sat down in wasn't the same place. Uh, it was a place where we could look out the window. It was a coffee shop or something like that, and we could look outside. I was sitting there, and I was telling him, "Nelson, I'm having a hard time understanding your book, and I'm hoping I can get some direction from you on how this works." He said, "You know what? Look over there across the street," he says. And I'm looking over there, and it's a very nice area. It's all very developed and everything. He said, see that spot right there?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I bought that piece of property." I can't remember how many years ago he said, "I bought that piece of property." And I'm improvising now, but I think he said something like $10,000 for that piece of property. And I said, and I was looking at the property, and the property was beautiful. It was all these buildings were there and everything. And he says, "Yeah, I bought that piece of property." And then 10 years later, I sold it for $1 million. And I looked at him and I said, "Wow, you really, you hit a home run with that one." He said, "Yeah, maybe." He didn't think that was so great. And then he said something that just startled me. "What do you think I did with the money?" And I just stood there. I didn't know what to say. I had no idea what he did with the money. I had no clue. And and he repeated it again. What do you think I did with the money? And I said, Mr. Nash, I have no idea. What did you buy more real estate? Is that what you did? Did you buy some bonds? He says, I paid off policy loans. And as you're looking at me right now, when he said that, it just sailed right over my head. I thought, you bought policy loans. That's odd. See, I had no knowledge of any of this. The idea of buying policy loans didn't make any sense. And so this time I was with him for about 2 hours, and I didn't learn anything more than when I first came the first time. Still didn't get any of it. This didn't make any sense.
Been there, done that, man.
Yeah, I got myself back in the car, and I started driving home. And I was thinking to myself, golly, I can't believe I came all the way out here, and I'm with this man for 2 hours. I still don't get his thing. I don't know what he's trying to say. But why does the thing keep, why does the book keep calling to me? It was the message that said, becoming your own banker. And see, because I knew banking, I knew it well, and I had to deal with banks and the Federal Reserve, I was thinking, you can't become your own banker. People don't become bankers. And so I'm driving along, and I'm kind of repeating to myself what he said. He said, well, he said he bought it for this price, and then he sold it for $1 million. And he asked me what he did with the money, and I had no idea what he was talking about. He said he paid off policy loans. And I said, oh my gosh, if he paid off policy loans and he had $1 million worth of policy loans, what the heck did he buy with $1 million? Again, you see, I couldn't connect those things. I said, man, he owed a lot of money. He owed a lot of money. That's what I thought. And so drove all the way home, put the book away, and forgot about it. Didn't discuss it, didn't think about it anymore. And I think it was maybe like 3 years later that it's finally hit, And what Nelson did is that what I realized is that Nelson, he took a liking to me, and I think it had a lot to do, again, because of the kind of work that I was in. And he was trying to convince me that I needed to write a book. I had not ever written a book before. I had written a lot of articles, tons of articles. And I'd been on podcasts, with Bob. And but Nelson wanted me to write a book, and he even went as far as to say, I'll fund it for you. He said that, I'll fund it for you. I'll help you do it. I'll fund it for you. And I said, Nelson, I've never written a book before, and I've written enough articles to have written a book, but I never have. And but that was something that he wanted me to do, and he agreed to help me with it. Again, we were not connected with each other at that time, and he did invite me to a think tank that he had put together. And I was looking around the table of the people that were there, and I didn't recognize any of them. I didn't know them. But I do remember that. What is her name? She's still with us today, and Julianne. Julianne was sitting there at this presentation that Nelson had invited me to at a think tank, and I remember uh, he introduced to the crowd. He said, "This young man, he's been going around the country talking to banks about what they do that hurts people so badly. This is what he does, talking to banks." And that's the truth. I was doing that. And I remember Nelson said, and so let's give this young man a hand. He said, so the small crowd that was there, clapped their hands. And I don't remember what all I said, but I remember my opening lines. My opening lines were, "Only an Austrian," and I'm holding up the book. And I said, "Only an Austrian could have written this book." It's the way it reads, what it says, and how it says it. Only an Austrian could have written this book, because Nelson was an Austrian, and he knew all about Austrian economics ever since he was a young man because of Leonard Read, his mentor, with Fee. When I made that statement that only an Austrian could have written this book, I think Nelson loved me forever after that. He liked that line, and I like giving it. I don't remember what else I talked about, but I do remember that after I did the presentation, I said, I don't remember. David, you probably have the presentation somewhere. You keep everything. But point is that after I made that presentation, uh, I was invited to speak at a lot of the places that Nelson would go and speak. And so we sort of became connected that way, and it was
Well, you had the credentials to talk to those banks because didn't you hold some sort of certified credit professional rating or something like that? Do you remember that? What was that? That certification you had?
uh, unfortunately, David, because of my aphasia, I don't, I just don't. I've lost so much.
Yeah, yeah. And you used to, yeah, going back, I remember the stories you tell me when you actually went to banks and you told them about how the Federal Reserve operated. You told them what the fractional reserve banking actually was. You said most of the people in the audience had no idea that's how the Federal Reserve worked and how they inflated the money supply by all those interbank transactions and stuff they used to do and whatnot. So that's what I remember. That's what Nelson loved about you because he saw all that also. You know.
And, and they put me on a speaking circuit.
Yeah, the banks did. Yeah.
They put me on a speaking circuit, so they had me going around the country giving that talk because they had no idea that this is what they did. So
So did you ever write that book?
actually, I did. I asked Nelson. I remember asking Nelson, I want to learn more about the insurance business. Who do I need to talk to learn more about the insurance business? And I said, I want to know the whole thing about it. I mean, I want to know about the people that run it and all that kind of stuff. And Nelson came up with the individual. Uh, he said, get in touch with this individual. And I can't remember his name. You probably do, David, but we went to his place one time, I remember, and Nelson, you and I were there, and the whole time we were there, we were guests there, and Nelson kept calling them the hired help.
Insurance company, home office, yeah, hired help.
He would be talking to me. He said, "Carl, they're just the hired hand. Don't worry about it." But when he gave me that information, I got in touch with an individual that was with Lafayette Life, and and his name was, what was his name, David? He was he was with Lafayette Life for a long time.
Dave Francis.
Yeah, what's his name?
Dave Francis.
Dave Francis. Mm-hmm. I said, David, I want to come into your home office, and I want to meet with the owners of the company. I want to see how they do things and everything. Can you set that up for me? And he was a little afraid of setting me up to do that, but he said, "Yeah, I'll get you set up to do that." And so I said, because what I want to do is I want to write a book. Nelson's been pushing me to write a book, and I think I know the kind of book I want to write. And that's when I had the beginnings of how privatized banking really works. That without me having written anything, I had that in my mind already, that this is what and I told Bob about it. I said, "Hey, I want to get into this stuff, and I want to get into the deep weeds of it. You know, I don't want your basic stuff. I want to get into it." Now, of course, Bob was an academic, and a good one on that. And he was probably, he probably still is one of the best Austrian academics there is. Bob, he really is. So that was the beginnings. I went to the people at Lafayette Life, and I remember I went into the office of the CEO of the company, and Bob was with me, and I just told him. I said, "Oh," he said, why do you want to learn all this stuff? Why do you want to meet with my people and everything? What are you going to get ready to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to write a book." He said, "Oh my God," he said. He said, "Well, if you're going to write a book, whatever you do, don't call it a bank." I mean, they didn't like that idea. Let's call it a bank.
Well, it's not a bank.
Yeah, but in the beginning, there was no insurance company that would even speak to us because we referred to it as banks, you know, and that was a no to call an insurance company a bank. Couldn't do it. It's against the law, more or less, you know. And so but this particular CEO, he says, "As long as you don't call it a bank, you know, I'll let you visit with my people." And so I spent the whole day there, and I got all this information and learned a lot of stuff. And the guy that one of their main guys gave me the books I should read about the insurance industry, and so I got the books and I started reading. And the more I read those books, the more interested I got in insurance and the wonders of insurance, and how old it is, you know. And so that was the beginnings of a relationship with Nelson that just kept building because of some of these outside activities that were going on. And I guess, and you'll have to help me remember this, David, because I know I'll mess it up, but I remember we went to Bob and I drove to Birmingham and met you and Nelson there. And I remember you saying at that time that uh, actually very similar to what we experience even today. You were saying, "Oh man, there's all kinds of bad rap out there about IBC. You know, there are people saying that it's a scam." And he said, "It's out there," and you were quite upset about it. He said, "I don't know if we're going to survive this because it's out there and it's rampant." And I remember hearing that, and we said good night, and we agreed to meet in the morning for breakfast. Well, that night, I remember going into the room, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. You know what you had said, David, and what we had already started. You know, in a different sort of way, and I drew out on a piece of paper for David and Nelson and Bob to see um, how we would formulate, um, the program that we have now.
Yeah. The IBC practitioner training program. Yeah.
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 And you asked me, because I remember you asked me, can you can you draw that again? And you wanted me to present it somewhere. I don't know, but I remember that was the beginnings of it.
No, yeah, it was a strategy on how to promote the concept both within the industry and with the general public, but to not sensationalize it, but to approach it from both an academic perspective. Because Bob was supposed to take it into the Austrian community also, so they could understand that this was a way to actually implement the one of the planks in the Austrian platform, privatized banking, so they could say, yeah, that's true, that's validated that. Yeah, and I remember that distinctly. But you did write the book, How Privatized Banking Really Works, and Nelson loved the book, and we promoted it, and we sold a ton of them, and the idea was to combine, becoming your own banker with How Privatized Banking Really Work, and those two books would formulate a training program for insurance professionals, so they could get an academic foundation on how the economics of life insurance, how the Austrian economic school kind of fit into that, and then you get into the numbers and stuff like that, whatever. But that was the start of it, and that was your vision on how to do that. I remember that distinctly. It was a Saturday morning in Birmingham. Yep. And that was 2012.
Is that when it was? 2012?
In 2012, June 2012.
Well, because I can't add or subtract, how many years is that?
That was 12 years ago,
12.
12 and a half years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, I can't believe what's happened. I mean, IBC is growing like crazy. It's everywhere, but from its early beginnings, where no one would have anything to do with us, it's incredible, actually.
Well, they didn't. Yeah, they didn't get it. Everybody didn't get it. They either focused on the insurance policy itself, or they focused on some wacky, build an offshore banking system thing or whatever. But Nelson said over and over and over again, this is ridiculously simple. Number one. Number two, it's built on a platform that's been proven for the last 200 years. Don't sensationalize it. Don't make things up. Understand how this all works. Understand the numbers. These are important too. But I guess the Austrian connection, from my mind, is simply, instead of going through a government design program to expand the credit in the United States to inflate the money supply, you're creating a private contract with an insurance company, a private company. They're a mutual holding company. So it's private and it's a unilateral contract, and so you do it right, you build it right, you use it responsibly, and now you have quote unquote an alternative banking system. Simple as that. And so that's in the talk you gave, I guess about 2014 or 15, when you did the business model, that really was a fantastic talk on the whiteboard, and that really highlighted how you can use IBC as a cash flow management system for business owners. I remember that distinctly, obviously. So
Yeah. Well, as you often hear me tell people that we're interviewing, that when we're interviewing, I like to point out to them, obviously the book, uh, and I ask them if they know who these people are, and 9 times out of 10 they don't. Uh, but
well, who are they?
huh?
Tell the audience who they are. Those three gentlemen on the book, who are they?
Yeah,
Who's the guy in the middle?
yeah. Well, obviously the guy in the middle is the dean
Yeah.
of the Austrian School of Economics. That's Mises. Of course, he's gone now, but he is the dean.
Yep.
And Murray Rothbard next to him.
Yep. The bow tie. Yep.
Yeah, he's American, but Murray Rothbard is no pushover. He's heavy duty too. If you read his book, uh, it's a heavy duty book, probably as equal to Mises's book. And this guy down here, that's F.A. Hayek. F.A. Hayek, he won the Pulitzer Prize
No.
in
Yeah.
economics.
Economics. Yep.
Yeah,
What was it? 1977, something like that.
yeah. And what he won it on was the business cycle. So before he put that together, everybody knew there was a business cycle, but they didn't know how it operated. And it was F.A. Hyatt who brought that, to the forefront. The business cycle is when we have these booms and busts, it comes out of the business cycle and the shenanigans that the business cycle will do. And so it's important that people know these facts, uh, not only of these Austrians are greats, but also, the book, How Privatized Banking Really Works, and what it's about. Now, you hear me tell people all the time that even though we refer to it as Austrian economics, it has nothing to do with Austria. It was the fact that Austria was the seat of knowledge for academics at that time.
So you also, one thing you did also, you and Robert, you came to the think tanks every year, and then you started the Night of Clarity in Nashville as I want to get this right, as a companion type conference to think tank, and you had Austrians come in and do presentations. Of course, Nelson would go up to Nashville and support it. You did that for, I guess, about 3 years. So those were always great meetings too. 2-day affairs up there in Nashville. So
when did y'all form the Nelson Nash Institute? When did that happen? What was that? What was the discussion around that decision to form the Nelson Nash Institute?
Well, obviously, we named it that later, but I don't know, David. What year was that?
well, 2013, we called it the Infinite Banking Institute. That was for 1 year, and that sounded odd. And so one of our practitioners said, what are you trying to do with the Infinite Banking Institute? Well, I said, well, we're trying to standardize the foundational aspect of infinite banking and promote Nelson Nash and continue his legacy. He said, well, why don't you call it the Nelson Nash Institute then? And so that was 2014 when we did that. And the reason we created the training program in the first place was because different insurance carriers who liked the infinite banking concept and wanted to support it were concerned because there was no training program that vetted insurance agents on how to, what it was about, how do you promote it, how do you do it. And they didn't want some insurance carrier or some correction. They didn't want an insurance agent to say, okay, this is how I train my agents. This is how I do it. Da, da, da. No, they wanted to come from Nelson. So Nelson, how do you want to do it? And so, with your vision that Saturday morning in 2012, and Robert Murphy and Nelson Nash and I, we said, okay, we need to create this training program based upon that strategy where we're training insurance agents. We're going into the Austrian economic community, and we're creating a foundational type of training program that will be the program that we send to the insurance carriers and say, check this off, approve this, and this is what we're going to use as our training standard. And so that was the start of our IBC practitioner training program. And obviously you were instrumental in it. Bob Murphy was instrumental in it. And of course, Nelson was along the whole way. And so that's how we're doing it. And that was 2013, and we're still going strong in 2024. We just enrolled our latest student last night. And so we're still doing it.
And so let's talk a little bit about the process of, the authorized IBC practitioner program. For those who are listening who may not be familiar with it, take us through the steps that involves, and so and what the course looks like.
The course is it's a exportable training package where individuals can take it, on their computer. And then schedule a final examination. That's a live proctor examination, and it consists of 14 modules, 14 lessons, quizzes, and final examination. And they complete that, then they've completed the course. And most students that go through the course have to get a check ride or a training with an authorized practitioner before we allow them to actually join the institute and get that designation as an authorized practitioner and a listing on the website for the public to use as a resource. So, the educational module is important, but the application piece is just as important about putting it into practice. And, key thing is, how do you use Nelson's book? How do you promote yourself? What kind of language do you use? Do you use stuff that is inappropriate and sensational, or do you use stuff that's language that's precise and, I don't want to say compliant, but it's consistent with the message that we promote and that Nelson promotes? And then how do you understand what the client's needs are when it relates to, becoming your own banker? Everybody's got different needs and different problems that they're trying to solve. So, so the biggest thing is identifying the problem. And Nelson talks about that exquisitely in the book, and then develop a solution for that problem. And typically a solution is, designing an appropriate policy and using it responsibly, okay, to quote unquote kill the snakes and dragons that Nelson used to talk about, snakes and dragons.
So
Anyway.
someone, once they complete the course and they go through a mentoring process, and once they complete all of that, they're listed on the Nelson Nash Institute's website as an authorized IBC practitioner. And so, people can go on and use that as a resource to find someone to work with that they know will structure these policies correctly. And these authorized IBC practitioners, they never stop learning. There's a continuation of their growth in this concept. And we've now added a coaching academy, which is a quarterly session for these practitioners to come to and to further their knowledge. And then we also have the annual think tank, and that has been growing in size. We had the largest crowd ever last year, and we're expecting an even bigger crowd in 2025. And so I think that's the big takeaway with working with one of these authorized IBC practitioners. They continue to deepen their knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. We're trying to build an accountability community also. So we help each other do the right things, and everybody says the wrong thing. I say it all the time too, and Carlos will correct me, or you will, and so we want our IBC practitioner community to work together and not be competitive, and to help each other and help each other accountable. Everybody needs an accountability group, period, and regardless of what you're doing, if it's your physical training or your faith-based accountability, which is important, or whatever it is. So that's an important aspect of the Institute and their practitioner training program. So, but anyway, Carlos, so what do you got planned for going forward? Anything that we need to hear about? You got any new books that you're dreaming up? You can do an audio book too. You don't have to write it down.
Yeah. Uh, well, it's interesting to me that the material that we continue to publish that I've written, like the one that just came out, what was it called? Who has the final say? Was that it? Yeah. I mean, it's as fresh in information as though it was written yesterday, and yet that's an article that I did a long time ago, but it's information that is current still. And I think what makes it current is what they talk about, what those banknotes, the information that they talk about, and also the connection to Austrian economics, which is very powerful and keeps it all, kind of locked in together. So we're all Austrians when we're connected with the Nelson Nash Institute. We're all Austrians, and our heritage is very long. It's been around for a long time. So uh, it's a wonderful thing to have, I believe. When you have a heritage like that and you're linked to it I don't know, it makes everything very meaningful, and it separates you from other things that aren't meaningful. Um, so I suspect that when you say what's coming up next, um, the last book that we just got through doing was called The Perfect Investment. And what's interesting about that book is that it's just a series of articles, all of which have been written, but they're current. All of them are. If you read them, you'll see that the information is current, and it's just laced with Austrian economics, all the way in there. Um, but if we're going to do more books or things of that nature, yeah, I am going to have to start writing again. And the good thing is that I have gotten better. I'm not as I'm not as bad off as I was after a stroke. I'm not I'm not perfect by any means, and I still struggle, but I can write now. Uh, Anne has shown me how to cheat. You know, so I can actually go on my desktop, and she's shown me, you do this, do this, do this, and you can read. And I can. And if I can read, then I can write. And if I write, then I ought to be able to calculate certain things. So, yeah, I mean, we might decide to do another book.
Exciting times ahead, man. So there you go.
Well, callers, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today before we wrap up?
Well, I think, obviously we've said a lot. We could have said more, but sometimes, we forget what we meant to say. But I just want to tell both of you how proud I am of both of you and being connected to both of you. As I said, uh, David's been a tremendous ally, through my stroke situation. So I'm just, I feel very blessed to be connected to David. And now to you, Lee, because you really are Nelson Nash's granddaughter. So the connection is very strong, and we needed that.
Well, thank you for all that you've done over the years and for not giving up on this concept and this idea and going back to it and really getting to fully understand it, and for developing that relationship with Nelson all those years ago and helping us create what we have today in the Nelson Nash Institute. That is quite the contribution, and we are very grateful to you for that.